In today's show, the Warriors are officially out of the playoffs, and the Blazers are headed likely towards a second lottery pick. Plus, a season review for Deandre Ayton. What's next for Dominating? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You listen to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's episode, it is the first of our player season reviews. We will recap what they did, take a look back at my best and worst case scenario predictions from the beginning of the season, way back in the preseason, in fact, and then we'll spin it ahead to what's next for each player in the roster. We'll run down everybody on the roster. We're going to start today with Deandre Ayton, the first of our previews. We're going to roll these out over the next handful of weeks as we make our way towards the draft and in the off season in earnest, but that's look forward to many more of these in your feed in the future. I won't bang you over the head with them, but I think it's a good way to kind of recap what has, what we saw from this team and what's next. It's good. I think it's helpful to look back, to look forward with each and every player, and it's fun to revisit some preseason predictions because sometimes I nailed it, and other times I missed very badly. But the news we got to do before we get into the Deandre Ayton stuff today, we're going to talk a lot about DA dominating. Before we get into DA, the Warriors lost. The Warriors went into Sacramento and had to win to keep their season alive and get a second play-in game and then win a second play-in game and potentially make the playoffs, in which case the Blazers would have got a pick in the mid-teens. But instead, the Warriors lost. The Blazers lost 61 times. I think it's okay for one night to really bask in the loss of a franchise that's been slightly, just a tad more successful than them over the last 10 years. What this means for the Blazers is that they are very likely to get a pick somewhere between 12 and 14, depending on what happens with the rest of the play-in. The final West playoff spot will be decided. Kings and Pelicans. Pelicans seem like they're really banged up. They play a home game, but they seem like maybe no Zion, no Brandon Ingram. Ugh, dang. So that might not be as competitive a game for the home team as you would have hoped for. And then the East play-in, still we haven't even seen it. So if the lower seeds get in, either one of Chicago or Atlanta, the Warriors pick could climb up to 12, but it's most likely going to be 13 and could fall to 14, but it'll be somewhere in that range. And if the Kings miss the playoffs, if they lose to the Pelicans, the Warriors and Kings have the same record, so they'll end up splitting the odds and having a coin flip to who gets the extra combo. The Warriors are going to end up with something like a 3.3% chance to jump into the top four. If they jump into the top four, they keep the pick, and the Blazers get a 2025 pick that is top one protected. I am of the belief that is a better scenario for the Blazers. I think you could argue otherwise. Like I don't feel like so strongly that I would call you silly if you feel otherwise. I might. I tend to do that, but I think that would be better. But it's only 3.3% chance roughly, depending on where they land. Like a less than 3.5% chance depending on where they land. So it's not particularly likely. The most likely scenario is that the Blazers will end up picking their own pick somewhere in the top 4, top 5, and then the Warriors pick at 13. So they'll end up with 2 lottery picks. That's the most likely scenario. Obviously, we'll cover everything that happens as we move towards the draft lottery. That's good news. I think that's worth celebrating. That the Blazers that at least the Warriors are in the lottery and gives the Blazers that chance that the pick jumps up into the top 4. And if not, they'll end up at 13, which is a pick they can either trade back to get other players, add packaged together in a larger trade to make stuff happen. It gives them just more immediate ammo to do things with. Obviously, if they have a first round top 1 for protected 2025 pick from the Warriors and it jumps into the top 5, they're also able to trade that as well. And that might even be much more valuable ammunition moving forward in terms of a trade. So in general, I think you're rooting for the Warriors to get a top 4 pick, with the obvious understanding that them adding a top 4 player would help them be better next year. And there's that's why the calculation isn't that simple for them. Like, you kind of want the Warriors to not be better next year. You want them to quadruple down on their aging stars and have their aging stars be defeated by Father Time. And the power of the power of linear time take down the Warriors so the Blazers end up with a better pick. Okay, let's talk Deandre Ayton. What we do in these capsules or these player reviews, I call them capsules, but season reviews, is at the beginning of the year for every player that's on the roster at the time, I go through how they ended up on the team, best and worst case scenarios, and what I think their likely role is, and then we'll revisit those best and worst case scenarios. But what I want to start with is just sort of a season review of sorts for Deandre Ayton, and that season review is best understood in 2 parts. When Deandre Ayton arrived, it happened suddenly. The trade happens days before media day, days before, 3 days before training camp starts, less than 2 weeks, 13 days before opening night. It was like, oh, I think on this a Wednesday, the Blazers are like, hey, they're rumored to be very close to working out some kind of deal with Phoenix, or at least in conversations with Phoenix. There's some real traction here. We'll see what happens. And then part of the larger Damian Lillard swap, the Blazers end up with Deandre Ayton, and he shows up at media day and he says, I'm dominating. That's what I do. And it felt corny and forced to give yourself a nickname, but there was hope, right? Because he's so skilled and so talented. And then it started so poorly. It was just a mess. Through his first 24 games, that's up through he got hurt the week of Christmas. His last game before he missed a 12 in a row was December 23rd, and he had knee tendonitis, and it kept him out for basically a month, 3.5 weeks. He came back January 19th, a little over 3.5 weeks. But in those first 24 games, from opening night in October until the week of Christmas, till December 23rd, Deandre Ayton averaged 13 points, 10.8 rebounds, and 1.6 assists. He was bad. I think he was so good when he came back that I think there's some revisionist history about Deandre Ayton actually wasn't bad. He was bad. He was having the worst season of his career. He was bad. And it's not all his fault. Certainly there is some sort of integrating him into the system and acclimating into what sort of how his teammates play and figuring out where he wants the ball and how to maximize what he does. And Avery Simons got hurt on night 1. He missed the next 18 games, and the Blazers just didn't have Ant was the person who was going to unlock what DA did, and the coaching staff, the Blazers coaching staff, which is not particularly creative on offense, didn't have a vision for how they were going to unlock Ayton. And Scoot was terrible at the beginning of the year, so that didn't help. There's so many factors, right? But DA was not good. DA was playing very poorly. 13 and 11 is just dude makes $35 million a year. He's and it's calling himself dominating. 13 and 11 on 55% shooting, 78% shooting from the line, and 11 field goal attempts a night. He just wasn't good. In those first 24 games, his high in any game was 23 points. Then he gets hurt. And it's on top of this, it's he's struggling. He has not been good. He's struggling to find sort of where he's going to fit in the offense and what he's going to do. The Blazers are struggling how to utilize him just in general. Everyone is, both a team and player are having an issue figuring out. Teammates as well are having an issue figuring out. And now he's hurt, and now he's going to miss a month. And it felt really deflating. Frustrating, deflating. Your boy was out here hating. It was a very rocky, very messy start to his Blazers career. And then he misses a game because he didn't leave his house during the snowstorm. DNP Ice, just a moment I will never forget. And neither will any of his teammates or Blazer staffers who were all at the arena. But DA didn't make it out of the ice. He returns from the ice like the caveman in The Simpsons. And he rocked after that. Like, he had 2 bad games right when he got back on the court because he just hadn't played in like a month. But he rocked. The second half of the season, he rocked. He was legitimately good. And good in a lot of different ways. And it was like the first half and the second half were it was truly the dichotomy of frustrating and dominating. Let's talk about dominating the second half of his season. That's what we'll do in the second segment. Join me there. But first, let me tell you about the all-new lineup of Nissan SUVs. If you're the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further, or you ever wonder what adventure could be right around the next corner, well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level, like the 2024 Nissan Rogue. It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. It's got class exclusive Google built right into your always updating assistant that you can call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone when you get in your car. Instead, you've got Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store built right into a 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. That's the 2024 Nissan Rogue. It's perfect. The perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. Well, maybe you got a bigger gang. You got a bigger crew that you roll with. Well, how about the 2024 Nissan Armada? It's going to change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger, explore further in the 2024 Nissan Armada. Take that Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. Look, Monopoly is the competitor's board game, and this is the competitor's phone mobile app. Play it on your phone. It's like, if you've ever been a Monopoly person, you know that it always brings out your competitive side. And now you can go find people that are competitive freaks just like you. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on classic Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is that you can play and then mess with your friends. You can charge them rent for spending time on your iconic properties, just like you do in classic Monopoly. But now you can also rob their vaults and get riches for yourself. Plus, the leaderboards will show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. They're always updating. It's live, is a whole bunch of fun. So, if you got that competitive side, go check out Monopoly Go. But you can also team up with your friends and people around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. All right. Talking dominating. The first half of his season was a rocky mess. The second half of the season, you got to see what it looks like when he puts it all together in the final 31 games of the Deandre Ayton experience. He finished averaging in those final 31 games 19.5 points, 11 rebounds, 1.7 assists. And up from the 55% shooting he was shooting in the first chunk of his season, he bumped it up to 58% shooting and made 86% of his free throws. But the big number for me is that in that first half of the season, those first 24 games, his half is like basically the calendar year, 2023 versus 2024. But like in that first half of the season for him, he was taking 11 shots a night, 10.9 field goal attempts per game. In the final 31 games, he was taking 16, 15.7 shots a night. Like I mentioned in this first segment, in prior to the injury, prior to returning from injury, his season high had been 23 points. He scored 10 games, 10 of his final 31 games. He topped 23 points, including 5 30-point games. Dude was a beast, just a beast. Like he finally figured it out, and part of finally figuring it out is just like, the Blazers, his teammates, I think Anthony Simons and him developed better chemistry the more they played together. I think Scoot, as he improved as a basketball player from like Scoot was like one of the worst players who played regular minutes in the NBA to begin the season, right? But once Scoot sort of got his sea legs a little bit and started to be a more functional point guard, him and DA had a much better chemistry. And the Blazers just kind of figured out that, like, when they, as they had more injuries and less, less Malcolm Brogdon after the trade deadline, meant there's just like more shots to be had, and the little bit that Jeremy Grant played at the end of the year meant there were more shots to be had, and Anthony Simons was, missed a handful of games here and there, but like, so there was just like more for Deandre Ayton to soak up, but he did a really good job of soaking that up. I think, like, to up his usage and have the efficiency go up was a really nice sign for him. They figured out what he was going to operate. He was going to do what he does, which is catch the ball in the middle of the floor and shoot it. He wants to catch it right at the foul line, just, maybe a couple steps behind the foul line. He wants to act quickly. He wants to either go up or he wants to jab step and maintain his space and shoot it. When he gets to his spots, and the Blazers kind of figured this out and dialed it in way more in the second half of the season, when Deandre Ayton gets to his spots, he's as good at scoring from that spot as anyone in the league. Like, when they couldn't find him in his spots and they didn't have a good plan, and it's like, oh, is he going to be a post-up guy? How are we going to use him? Oh, he's just a pick and roll guy, but we don't have as good pick and roll operators, particularly when Ant misses 20 games. It's like, they didn't know how to use him. Once they figured out how to use him, and once he kind of settled in, and I think in that first half of the season, you saw the sort of waning energy from Deandre Ayton. There's nights where he's just like, he's not playing hard. And you didn't get that in the second half of the season. Once he got rolling, and once he had some positive reinforcement, he rocked. And I think that's, I think that there was a really solid close to the year. Taken as a whole, it's a little bit different. Like, you have to, like these things aren't separate entirely. Like, you have to take the first half and the second half all happened together, but they're very different players. They're very different functional players, very different asks from the team. Very different. It's just like the way they dealt with DA was different than the way they utilized and got him his touches, and found him in space, and they set pin downs to get him in those spots. They set screens, like empty side pick and rolls, but he, instead of rolling all the rim, it was specifically so the help couldn't get to the middle as quickly and he could take shots from the elbow. Like, they just utilized him in smarter ways, and that really matters. But you got to take it as a whole, right? And that's what I want to do quickly here, what I want to do to close the show is revisit my best and worst case scenarios, because when you take the whole sort of Deandre Ayton picture, I think it's hard to parse whether he ended up in where I thought the best case was and where I thought the worst case was, because he had two very different seasons all mapped into one. Let's revisit what Michael from the past said back in October, and then talk about what's next for Deandre Ayton to close the show. But first, let's talk eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, baby, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. I want to revisit Michael from the past here briefly. In my season previews in October, I do the best and worst case scenarios. And these are the best, what I call within reason and without injury. So like I'm talking a sort of a reasonable best case, reasonable worst case, and like nobody's worst case is getting hurt. So let's revisit Michael from the past, and what did he have to say about what Deandre Ayton was. And this was posted back on October 9th. We hadn't seen DA play in a regular season game. We were a couple weeks away from it. But what was I anticipating way back then? And then we'll talk about where he landed and what's next for DA. Michael from the past, take it away. The best case scenario for Deandre Ayton, it is that he averages 23 and 12 with a block and slightly improved playmaking, is that he expands his range a little bit and becomes at least slightly below average three-point shooter. He is an anchor of a decent defense. He continues to be a really awesome scorer in the paint with great touch out to 15 feet with that added little bit of three-point range to make him even more difficult to deal with as a pick and pop player, and that he's rugged and physical and uses his massive frame and his athleticism to be dominant. That's to be dominating, as he's termed it. That's the best case scenario. Here's the thing about Ayton is that he's so skilled and so talented that the worst case scenario really isn't that far off. The worst case scenario is something like 19 and 10 with a little bit of a roller coaster. And by that, I mean that there are 10 game stretches where you don't really feel Ayton's presence. And he shows up in the box score. And if you're not watching closely, it's like he hasn't even been that bad. He's shooting 55% from the field and scoring 20 points. Like, what more do you want? But if you do watch closely, you realize that you just don't feel his presence. The worst case scenario is that Ayton is big and that he is allergic to the paint on both ends. He's not going to become less skilled. He's not going to have worse touch. He has incredible touch around the rim. He has a great looking pull-up jump shot from 15 feet. That's not going anywhere. There's no worst case scenario where he gets diminished skills. The worst case scenario is that there are more games when you wish you got more out of him. When the consistency of playing with force, and that's the phrase many in Phoenix have used when talking about Deandre Ayton, is the consistency of playing with force. It's just up and down. And there's 10 game stretches where you just don't feel him when you the other team doesn't feel him when you watch him. And then he plays 5 straight games where you're like, oh yeah, this dude is mega talented. Why don't we see that every night? Thank you, Michael from the past. Deandre Ayton probably was below my worst case scenario for the first part of his season, and then not quite up to my best case scenario for the end of his season, although he was really good. He was really solid. I think in general, the overall pendulum swings slightly to worst case scenario just because of the nature of the predictions. But I think he landed in the middle for the most part, which is the whole point. Is just try to gauge the polls. Obviously, I think getting it wrong and having someone way outperform the best case scenario is more fun, but that's why I try to do them within reason. He was probably below one of the polls and then not quite there. So I'd say landed in the middle of the best and worst case scenarios. I'm curious, though, quite frankly, I would say without having really seen Deandre Ayton playing games back in October, I predicted the full experience, and then I was treated to the full experience. Thank you, DA, for your generosity for the full Deandre Ayton experience. But what I want to talk about here to close the show is how do they bottle up those last 31 games? And then have it be a 75 game event next year, right? How do you get 70 games of the good DA? And I think it's a really hard puzzle to solve. I should probably be upfront here before we get too deep into this. I don't really like DA's game. He doesn't pass. He doesn't get free throws. He can't create for himself. He's a good play finisher, but he can't give him the ball and have him dribble. And if he takes, just the sort of NBA tracking data says he basically never took shots when he took more than 5 dribbles. Very, very rare, very few of his field goal attempts. And when he did, they didn't go in. He's just not someone who's going to cross and get himself into the paint. And you can't give him the ball and let him go create. He's not a very good passer. And so he improved at that for sure over the year as a playmaker in the short roll, for sure improved from game 1 to game, however many he played, 65. He improved, but he's still not you can't run. He's not a high post hub, right? You couldn't throw him the ball and let him be a great passer, right? He's not Domantas Sabonis or something like that. He's not even like Andrew Bogut in that way. Like, he's just not a playmaker. He's a great play finisher. He's excellent at it. He's an excellent play finisher. He can mix up rolls to the rim and get some lob dunks. He kills it from the high school 3-point line. Like, he's just so good in that, and from that range. He's one of the, like, honest to goodness, is like one of the great 20-foot shooters in the history of the league. Like, he's excellent at it. He's really good at it. But I don't like the aesthetics of his game very much. And the number that really sticks out for me is 79. He took 79 free throws in 55 games. He took 79 free throws in 1,800 minutes. For context here, Delano Banton played 30 games and just shot in 875 minutes, 876. He took 100 free throws. He took 21 more free throws in 25 fewer games. Duop Reith, the guy who launches away from three, took more free throws in his minutes than Deandre Ayton did. That's Duop Reith, who took almost twice as many threes, 245, as he did twos, 125. Still ended up taking 93 free throws in 1,200 minutes compared to the 79 free throws in 1,800 minutes for DA. Played about 600 more minutes and took 14 fewer free throws than the Blazers' backup center. I don't know what to do with that. Like, that doesn't... I just don't think you can build an offense around someone like that with DA. But what Deandre Ayton does well, he rocks at. Like my personal opinions aside, like I am not without bias, right? Or with but in any of these things, right? I'm not a neutral party here, but I recognize that the things he does well, he does really well. And here is why I think he is a challenging puzzle to solve. When he wasn't really involved and they couldn't figure out how to use him, he had his worst month of the season in December where he just looked checked out and it was getting really troublesome. And then when he was like the focal point, the first option on offense, or when he was playing with Ant, like the second option on offense, but he was going to get a bunch of shots every night, a bunch of opportunities. And even if he didn't, they're going to play through him as a pick and roll guy, and they're going to play through him as a pick and pop guy to the mid range. Like, when he got those opportunities, that was the best DA you saw. And he was good on defense. Like, he was engaged and all those things. He wasn't like this elite defender, but he was good on defense. He rebounded the ball at a high level, and he scored the ball at a high level doing what he does. That is valuable. And if you can get that when he's your third or fourth option, then he's a really good player. But here's the puzzle for me, for DA. Because of what he does and how he plays, right? No, not a free throw guy, not a playmaker, not a shot creator. A play finisher and an excellent one. But if he needs to be the first or second option in order to be engaged and the best version of himself, it's really hard to figure out how he can be the sort of, how to best utilize him. Because on a good team, DA can't be, because of the way he plays, he can't be a second option, right? He can't be, because, the league average true shooting percentage is right at 54%. And the way he shoots, the league average true shooting percentage is right at 58%, and true shooting percentage factors in the value of free throws as well as 3-pointers, along with the rest of your made field goals. 58% was the league average this season. Deandre Ayton shot .587. He shot just slightly above league average. He's elite at what he does, but because of his shot diet, he is a slightly above average shooter based on the rest of the league because of the way he shoots. I don't think you got to he can be the Blazers center for the next couple seasons and is totally fine. I just don't think he can be a building block focal point because of his limitations. That's my true belief. And if he isn't that, right? Like, if he is functionally like a role player on offense, right? Because they get other, this isn't going to happen in the immediate future, right? But if you're thinking like the next good version of a Blazers team, or even 2 seasons from now when they're a little more competitive, then I think they will be next year. But we could think about next year as well when I talk about this. It's like, If he is not the focal point, do you get the best version of DA? If he has to be the focal point in order to get the best version of him, but because of his limitations and his style, there's a ceiling on what your offense can be. If he's the focal point, it's really hard. That's a tough nut to crack. It's a tough nut to crack. I think there's a world in which DA buys into the system and he says, you know what, I am really good at what I do and I'm going to just go do it and I'm going to bring it on defense. And even if I get if I'm third or fourth in the pecking order, I can still be the best version of myself. It's just, we have not seen that at any point in his career. And even at the beginning of this season with the Blazers, when that was the case, you didn't see the best version of him. Can he be good? Yeah. I think he can be totally fine. I think he's again, what he does well, he does very well. But his limitations, there's just stuff he just straight up doesn't do. Can he be the Blazers starting center all of next season with no problem? Absolutely. Can he be the Blazers starting next season for the remainder of his contract the last 2 years? Absolutely. But when you're thinking about sort of what is a really good version of the Blazers team that includes Deandre Ayton look like? I have trouble figuring out how you solve that puzzle. It is tricky for me. And certainly he could prove me wrong here. Like this is in some ways speculation about, based on the 6 seasons he's played in the NBA. But which is kind of a lot of time. But I don't think DA is bad, capital B. I just think what he is as a player is pretty specifically defined and specifically contained. And if he didn't expand on that this season, when he had carte blanche to do whatever the freaking heck he wanted, I can't imagine him doing that in the future. So the challenge for the Blazers and the challenge for Deandre Ayton is say, this is what he does well. We absolutely figured out how to maximize what he does well in a very specific setting to end the season. Can we bottle that up? Can we get it? He might end up being something like that to begin next season or for most of next season, depending on what the Blazers roster looks like. So it might not be a problem. But at some point, when you're building a good team, DA is going to be back to being a third or fourth option. And can you get the most out of him when he is that? That's the challenge. That's the question that I'll have for him, and it'll be the question I have for him when we do season previews in the fall. All in all, the second half of Deandre Ayton's season was really promising, but it leaves me with still a lot of questions about what he becomes and what he can become and what the Blazers can become if he is their focal point, or more importantly, if he's not their focal point. Okay. That is going to do it for today's show. Tomorrow's show, we will talk all things NBA draft with my man Rich from Mavs Draft. You won't want to miss that, talking Blazers draft prospects. And then Friday's show, it's going to be fun. A hater's guide to the playoffs. Come join me for that one. I appreciate you listening. Tell your friends about the podcast. I will talk to you soon.